that fights foreclosures for one, but also works on tenants' rights and homeowners' rights and in all different types of situations. So, now.
Thanks, Mimi. So I want to say that it's good to be here in the amphitheater, Occupy Oakland. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my name is Nell, and I work at Causa Justa, Just Cause. And we do immigrant rights work and housing rights work. We started with housing rights work here in Oakland when we got an ordinance passed called the Just Cause Eviction Law. And it basically says that your landlord cannot put you out of your housing just because somebody comes along who makes more money than you. Yeah, right? So that happened through a voter initiative process. And I feel really proud about that because it means that we spent time walking the neighborhoods, explaining to people what the initiative was and garnering the community support. So it feels really important that we spend time talking to the people in Oakland about what they see as important, what the issues are, what needs to happen about that. So we got the Just Cause eviction law passed in the early 2000s. And since then, we have also done tenants' rights work of all different kinds. We do a lot of advocacy and direct action. So it's really great to be here in the midst of people who are clear about what the power of a direct action is, right? So the immigrant rights work comes in partly because we're living in a time where there's a lot of hostility toward immigrants here in this country. I don't have to tell folks here that that's true. And what we see is that hostility toward immigrants shows up also in the relationships that immigrants have with the banks and also with their landlords, right? So if your landlord gets mad at you and you happen to be living here without papers, then the threat of calling ICE is always present, you know. So we do a lot of immigrants' rights work because we recognize that it's an important issue in the Latino community. So again, we're trying to follow the lead of the people who are most directly affected by the issues. So I started with Just Cause as a member when I bought a home here in Oakland because I don't really want to live in a city where people can't afford to live and pay rent. And so I scrambled around and got the help of my community to buy a home, and then I joined Just Cause to support the tenants' rights to be there. And I started working at Just Cause just this summer. And I'm a homeowner facing foreclosure myself. I wonder if there are other people here who are either homeowners facing foreclosure or people who have lost their homes to foreclosure. Yep. Here in California, there have been 1.2 million foreclosures, and they expect another million or so between now and the end of 2012. So when you get numbers like that, you can tell that it's not like some odd circumstance or anything like that. I mean, there's been a very deliberate and purposeful attack on the economic wealth of working people. And it has come really on the heels of decades-long attack on the poor. So I want to just acknowledge that, you know, those of us who have been impacted by foreclosure, it's a, you know, they call us the middle class, right? And part of how it got to be this way is that when Ronald Reagan in the 80s came on television and said, well, you know, homelessness, that's a lifestyle choice, and those people who are out there on cardboard boxes, on grates, they're there because they want to be, right? And we, from right then, as a country, began to disinvest in public housing. So it was like a code that he was saying, that's it, folks. We're not going to keep investing in the housing and urban development department. And since then, we have seen decreases in the amount of money going into public housing every year. And in 1996, when Bill Clinton deformed welfare, right, there was not very much outcry. And so we're living in the aftermath of the poorest among us having been attacked for decades, and now they're on to the middle. So what's good about that is that we are the 99%, and now we're clear that there's really not that much difference between, those at the very bottom and those in the middle, except that they just hadn't gotten to us yet, but now they have. So what I want to say about my own story about foreclosure is that in spite of the fact that I've lived in that home for over 10 years, and when I bought the home with my partner, we could afford the home. We made regular payments every month, for years and years and years. But between the time that we bought that home and now, a few things have happened to us. Some of these things may sound familiar to other folks. My partner had a heart attack and a stroke, and so she went from being a fully employed teacher to living on a disability retirement income. And in that same 10 years, my mother became unable to take care of herself and live independently, so I took her in and I became a full-time caregiver. And we live in a society where caregiving is not highly valued, rarely recognized as work, and certainly not paid at all, paid not well, if at all. So what we suffered was a serious decrease in our income and therefore our ability to pay our mortgage. And regardless of the fact that we have, reasons why we can't pay it that are legitimate, Chase Bank has not seen fit to modify our mortgage. They've just given us lots and lots of runaround and go here and do this and send that, and we didn't get it, and a lot of runaround. So we've stopped paying Chase Bank, and we are fighting them about a foreclosure. Thank you. I want to encourage everybody to really, think about what it means when they convince us that housing is at the will of the market, that it should be left to the discretion of the market to decide whether or not we as human beings deserve housing. We're finished with that. Housing is a basic human right. And that's the approach that we take at Casa Justa Just Cause. So we work with tenants. I want you to know that about half the people who are impacted by foreclosure are tenants, most of whom's rent is paid up to the day, but your landlord isn't able to make his mortgage. And so then when you get home, you have a 3-day notice. So we work with a lot of tenants who are dealing with the fact that their landlords have been foreclosed on, and that they are then thrown into a chaos around their housing based on that. And we also work with homeowners who are fighting to stay in their homes. And we do that work in a bunch of different ways. We basically follow the lead of the people whose case it is. And so the work is really about saying to folks, here's the information, because it's hard to make a good decision if you don't have good information. So we take a look at, what is the information? How is it that 9 million households have been impacted in California? We have a member, Ms. Tia, who was foreclosed on as a homeowner, and then she was lost her housing as a tenant when her landlord got foreclosed on. So she's been impacted twice. And then we offer advocacy. We work with folks to write demand letters to banks or to the lenders. We work with them to contact their public and elected officials and hold them accountable, because we feel like the government has been complicit in the creation of this problem by their neglect of the need of the population for housing, and that they should not be let off the hook, although we're going, of course, after the banks. So we contacted public and elected officials and insist that they involve themselves in these cases, that they contact the banks. We help people organize their community, help them talk to their neighbors, talk to their family members, break the isolation and the shame that often surrounds foreclosure, because that's one of the ways that they get to take our houses, is if we stay isolated. So we do direct advocacy. We do direct advocacy work, and then we also do direct action. So every weekday at the Alameda County Courthouse, they auction homes, and we work with homeowners to interrupt those auctions so that investors who come there to pick the flesh off of our bones get the message that we are not dead yet. And that they are not welcome to kick us out of our homes and take them and turn them over for profit. They are not welcome to do that. And that they will be interrupted, and that they will be challenged and pushed, and it won't, we won't go away. So we also have been involved in doing some eviction defenses in the form of organizing folks to decorate and then camp out, right, to defend against the sheriff coming to evict folks. So we do direct action all along the line. I just want to say a couple other things and then invite people who are facing foreclosure to come speak out, tell your story, if you feel able and willing to do that, and also take questions. So I want to say that here in Oakland, there have been 28,000 foreclosures since 2008. Okay, 28,000. And today, there are over 2,000 homes that are either bank-owned, many of those are empty, that are pre-foreclosure, people are struggling to make their payment, they may be in default, or up for auction. So those three categories, there are over 2,000 homes that are either up for auction, pre-foreclosure, or bank-owned. That's a lot of homes, besides the 28,000 that have already been foreclosed on, okay? And the 90% of those foreclosures, 90% of that 28,000 are concentrated in 3 zip codes. So it goes back to my point about it's not a coincidence, it's not happenstance, it's a very well-planned and unfortunately well-executed transfer of wealth from those who have less to those who have more. The 3 zip codes in Oakland are 94621, 94603, and 94605, and they're all in deep East Oakland. And what those zip codes have in common is that they have very, very high concentrations of black folks, Latinos, and elders. And so you can see once again that it's a systematic attack on our financial wealth, and attack on our housing is actually attack on our physical health, because we've seen in escalated rates of stress-related diseases, high blood pressure, heart attack, panic attack, high blood sugars, family violence, right? We see all these things, dissension. Those are the things that happen to people inside families. And then we also know that neighborhoods are devastated by the loss of property values. We know that the city coffers are being robbed by the banks. And I think one of the ultimate insults really in it is that if they foreclose on your home and you refuse to leave, then the bank, a private entity, calls the sheriff, a county resource, to put you out. Okay? And I think that is an outrage. That why should the banks be able to use county resource to rob us of our homes? Okay? So I think that the county supervisors are going to have to start hearing about that, and the more we refuse and push the sheriff to go back to the bank and say, I can't devote that resource to putting people out, because then we're going to go to the county because we need help with housing. Okay, so it's like we have to really challenge the idea that the banks get to decide how the county resource that whose money, our money, right? So the bank should not be allowed to use that to put us out of our homes. Okay. I want to invite anyone who is a homeowner fighting foreclosure to join us on Tuesday, 6:30 at 3463 San Pablo. That's the West Oakland office of Casa Justa Just Cause. And we have a foreclosure prevention group every Tuesday night, and we help people sort their cases out. We have some legal resource. We have people that we're working with here at Occupy to put some life into some of the defenses that we want to put together to keep people in their homes and to put people back in homes who've been improperly foreclosed on, because there are it's hard to say how many improper foreclosures there are, but there's so much malfeasance in the operations of the banks that there are questions about many of the foreclosures. You have a question?
Yeah, just the time and the location again.
So the time is 6:30 to 8 at 3463 San Pablo Avenue. Tuesday. Yeah, each Tuesday we meet. And so if you're a homeowner facing foreclosure, or you know homeowners who are facing foreclosure, I would welcome you to come, or send folks. Mm-hmm. Yes, and if you need Spanish translation, you can let me know, and we can provide that. And then I know that Occupy the Hood is organizing in terms of Occupy Oakland. So I don't know if Mimi has information about that, but if you are not a homeowner, but she does have information about that. So if you're a person who's interested in supporting the foreclosure, the eviction defenses and foreclosure reversals, we're calling them, feel free to contact me, and I can contact Mimi, or contact Mimi, and I have business cards. And I want to thank you all for being out here, and if there are other questions, or if there are folks who want to come tell their stories about fighting the banks control the four biggest banks: Wells Fargo, Chase, B of A, and Citibank control over $9 trillion. So my line is, I need my home more than the bank needs one more, okay? So I want you all to say that with me. We need our homes. We need our homes more than the banks need one more. More than the banks need one more. Thank you so much. Thank you. And if there's anyone who would like to speak out, if there are other questions, feel free. Come forward. Tell us your name.
JP, I just had a question about eviction when you're a tenant. So you live in a place and you're foreclosed, and the owner of the place gets foreclosed on, and you have a lease. So are you saying that the lease just goes away? Can you elaborate on that process, and also how that relates to the just cause eviction here in Oakland?
Yeah, thanks, JP. Thanks for that question. So tenants are protected by the just cause eviction ordinance, even if your landlord has been foreclosed on. So what happens is the new owner is obligated to honor the lease that you have with them, with the old owner, right? So a lot of people don't know that, and they get a 3-day or quit notice, and they feel like, oh my God, I gotta move, and they just get on a hard scramble around finding a place. But yeah, you actually are protected by that clause, and we do tenant rights work. So you can always call Just Cause if you are a tenant who's facing eviction or having a problem with your landlord. for more help about that. If you get legal notice, then we can help you, file a response with the courts and protect your right to housing. Any other questions? There are, as a tenant, you're protected from being forced to move. If you decide that you are willing to move, then we help people negotiate help to move, right? Because moving is expensive and you're being inconvenienced. And if the landlord, if you're dealing with the landlord, then you're dealing with somebody, it's an investment for them, right? At any rate, they generally have a better economic standing and need to be responsible to you as a tenant. So we do help people negotiate getting from the owner cash to move. Yeah, to support a move. Any other questions? Anybody? I see one of my old neighbors here. Any other questions about foreclosures or? So this question is about eviction defense. So it looks like a few different things. It looks like turning out in court because in California, it's a non-judicial foreclosure state, which means that they can foreclose on you and take your home without ever going before a judge. There are some legal mandates. There's a set of things they have to do, but they can foreclose on you without ever seeing a judge. But they cannot evict you from your home without taking you to court. And so that has actually become one of the key points of intervention is in the housing court. In Massachusetts, there's a sister organization. We're part of a national alliance called Right to the City. And there's a sister organization there called City Life Vita Urbana that has been able to win with Mr. C.K. Bailey, who's a homeowner in Boston, who was foreclosed on by the Bank of New York improperly. And they challenged that foreclosure in the housing court. And of course, the lender wants to say that the housing court doesn't have jurisdiction over foreclosures, but the Massachusetts State Judicial Supreme Court upheld that he had been improperly foreclosed on and that he was entitled to remain in his home. So it looks like legal casework, right, around getting the legal precedent to be honored and respected here in California on a routine basis. It also looks like blockades. We have done blockades again where we create a perimeter around the home. We work with the neighbors to support the blockade. We recruit volunteers who can camp out. We do provide direct action training so that people understand what the process is. We identify people who can risk arrest. We do a whole set of things around around a direct action to stop the sheriff, to deter the sheriff from being able to execute the eviction notice. And I heard of a case in Rochester where the sheriff was deterred by the blockade the first time it came out. But in a week, they sent a SWAT team. So you can imagine me in my little house. I'm looking out there thinking, what the? Right. There's a SWAT team out there to put me out of my house, right? So they put her out. And in about 6 months, she was still working with the same organization and agreed to go back in her house. And basically at that point, they ramped up a campaign to say to the sheriff, how can you justify, find out how much it costs to send a SWAT team out to remove one little old black lady from her house, and then start publicizing that, because again, it's egregious misuse of the county resource to send a SWAT team that probably costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, to remove somebody from their house for Citibank or Chase or Wells or B of A. So we do blockades and look for homeowners who can do that, and we support everybody to do, figure out what they can do and help them to organize their community to take a stand that really makes sense for them. Thanks. I think the beauty of Occupy is that there is such a creative, energetic, dynamic brilliance that comes out of it that I have a lot of trust in, frankly. I appreciate that Occupy Oakland issued a resolution in support of people taking over homes and moving the Occupy idea to a different level. And we are working with Occupy Oakland here to accomplish a set of things that we've identified as our work. So we appreciate that being able to engage in a way that makes sense for us and for Occupy. Beyond that, I just think that it's this time is thrilling for me. It's the moment I've been working for decades, and I am just glad, really, that we have figured out how to deny the 1% their main weapon, which is to divide us in the 99% from each other because we're different from each other, okay? And it's quite clear that people are finished with that, and we now recognize that our differences are not the reason to be divided from one another, but actually part of what's exciting about all being here at the same time in the same place is that we are different and that we can stop allowing the 1% to use our differences to divide us. Okay, thoughts or questions? We have had varying success. I mean, anybody who knows anything about the foreclosure crisis knows that a lot of people have lost their homes. I mean, a lot of people have lost their homes. So, but what I want to say about that, two things. One thing is that 50% of the people facing foreclosure never ask for help, right? So there's something about what happens to us in this society where we get trained to think that it's my fault, even though it's happening to millions and millions of people, and we have we have a lot of evidence that the subprime mortgage crisis was a policy decision, right? That they designed inferior mortgage products and then marketed those in targeted ways, so we know that, and they've been quite effective in putting a lot of people out of their homes. What happens, in each individual case is that people have different needs. Some people need time. Some people are, have decided that what they need is time or cash or, whatever it is that they need. Some people have decided that they're going to stay in their homes no matter what. So we've had some successes. We have some people who've gotten loan modifications and are still, that work for them. I want to say that the whole loan modification process is a bit of a distraction, really, because the banks are not mostly granting modifications. And in the cases where people do get modifications, they often are the loans are still not affordable. And even in cases where the loans are affordable, the homes are often underwater, which means that I may have a note from the bank that says I owe them $300,000, but now the bank is telling me that the home is only worth $150,000. So then I get a mortgage where I'm making a payment on a home that's worth half of what the bank says I owe them, and that is a problem because we didn't inflate the values of the homes. That was not us who sent out these assessors who said, oh yeah, this little 4-room house, that's worth $400,000. We didn't do that. And we didn't design the mortgages, the no-doc loans, right, where the bank said, how much do you make? And I said, well, I'm a janitor. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. We can fix it. We can make the numbers work, right? And then you get a loan that they know you cannot afford. They're the bankers. They know what they're doing, right? We as consumers, we're caught in the squeeze between the government refusing to build public housing, abandoning any commitment to affordable housing, and our need to still be housed. That's where we got squeezed. We need to be housed even though the government abandoned public housing and any commitment to affordable housing. So then the banks are like, we got them now. We got them now, let's go, right? So in answer to your question about how successful we've been, we've had some successes in helping people accomplish what it is they're trying to accomplish. So if they're trying to get cash for keys, if they're trying to do a short sale, right? There are different things that people decide to do based on their individual circumstances. But for the most part, we are in a crisis of homelessness that has been escalated by the foreclosure crisis. And it's really devastating. I mean, devastating. There was a question in the back. Huh? I can't hear you. Yeah, that's the dilemma of the neighbor, right? So I heard an offer from from someone in the front row. I mean, that's what I want to try to say is, you got homes without folks and folks without homes, and it would just seem like there would be some kind of way we could, work that out. I mean, it would seem to me. So I know there's some talk about that. And we have been working to put pressure on the banks, in fact, because they are, they own many homes here in Oakland. And those homes have been left empty while they've put people out. So we've been putting a lot of pressure on the banks to make modifications that are affordable and that include principal reductions, right? That lower the amount of the mortgage that they say we owe them. We also have been pushing the banks to, pushing the City Hall folks to fine the banks for foreclosures, right? Because they took HAMP money and they took TARP money, saying that they were going to begin to make loans again. If you bail us out, then we promise you we will, be good to you. Okay. And what have we gotten? Bigger banks. The banks that were too big to fail before they got bailed out, they're now bigger because they ate up a lot of smaller banks. And they are not working with homeowners in any serious fashion. I mean, it's like 5% of the people who apply for modifications actually get them. And those 5% are often not affordable, and the principal needs to be reduced. So we have not gotten a good response from the bank, but we do keep pressure on city officials to fine banks, hold them accountable for the same things that they would hold me accountable for as a homeowner, which is that my property has to be kept up and kept in a condition that my neighbors can tolerate. So what I would suggest is that you contact your city council person and demand that they, if you can find out who owns that house, which bank, then demand that they put pressure on that bank. We've been calling on the city of Oakland to move their money out of Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is the bank of the city of Oakland, and we know that Wells Fargo is egregious in their behavior towards homeowners in Oakland. And they have a plan for housing for us. It's called jail cells and detention centers. Okay, they have Wells Fargo is a direct investor in jails and detention centers. So then it begins to make sense why they don't want to modify our mortgages, because they're counting on the return from having their investments in prisons and detention centers pay off. So we definitely want to, put pressure on city officials to hold banks accountable, and put pressure on banks to work with us, their consumers. Because after all, whose money? Whose money? Our money. So I want to thank you all, and if there are not any other questions or comments, I'll invite Mimi. Well,
I want everybody to remember the banks have been getting money for less than 0.1% interest.
Can't hear you?
The banks have been getting money for less than 0.1% interest.
The interest rate that the banks get money at is less than 1%, you say? Less than... Well, 0%. Less than 0.1%. And my mortgage with Chase is at 7.25. So they have a different idea about, the value of their time and energy and resource, and the value of our time and energy and resource. Right? Mm-hmm.
There's at least a 3 or 4 unit building around the corner from my house that's been vacant for at least 6 or 8 months. It's got a beautiful backyard, nice neighbors on many bus lines. I would love some nice neighbors to move in there.
Okay. Okay, right. It sounds like we need here she is, so feel free to go talk to her and find out the information. So any other thoughts, comments, questions? Any homeowners here want to speak out about their dealings with the banks?
Just real briefly, I know for a lot of people who wanted to have these kind of actions, it's hard to get any web presence, but if you want, you can shoot an email to info@occupymyforclosure.org, and we'll make sure it goes right up right away. Just the other thing is, I also have gotten a foreclosure in the past. I'm one of the very few people who are lucky enough to get a loan modification. It's affordable, it's 30 years, it's under 2%, and I was really fortunate. But it wasn't just being fortunate, I was turned down 6 times by the bank. And it's really about, being persistent and just being a pain in the ass, and just, continue to advocate for yourself, and don't expect anyone else to, don't expect the banks to make it easy for you, is really what I should be saying. So, just sort of keep at it, and just know that there's hope.
Thanks. Thanks. And what I want to add is that there on December 6th, there's a National Day of Action to take back the land and reverse foreclosures. House is a loose collection of folks who are across the country working with Occupy to address the foreclosure crisis. And so keep your eyes and ears open, because we're going to be doing some actions around here in alignment with this National Day of Action on December 6th. The December 6th, I don't know. I don't know if anybody here knows if the GA has approved of, issued support of the December 6th National Day of Action.